The first book that I read recently was Chthon by Piers Anthony, which is an incredibly strange science fiction novel originally published in 1970. It follows a man who is sentenced to a life imprisonment in a deep subterranean garnet mine, which serves as a prison for humanity's worst, most violent, most dangerous offenders. His crime is said to be that he fell in love with a mysterious being known as a mignonette back on his home planet, which is an agricultural planet that specializes in the cultivation of these flowers, which, when you pick them and present them to a loved one, they will remain alive until that love dies, which is a little bit fairy tale-esque. But as a child, living and working on his family farm, he is lured into the forest by this song. So these mignonettes are almost like sirens. Get these two plot lines running simultaneously. One of them takes place in this garnet mine on the planet Chthon. None of the prisoners know exactly where this planet is or the nature of it. And then the other plot line is flashbacks to his past and how he ended up falling in love with this mignonette and then seeking her out as well. The prison plotline is probably the most compelling because there's so much mystery going on in that mine. It's really hot, really dark, and really horrible in terms of the conditions. The prisoners need to mine these garnets, these gemstones, in exchange for food. So they really have no choice other than to work. Escape is said to be possible, but is extremely perilous because the winding tunnels are really difficult to navigate in the darkness. But also there's said to be this creature, this chimera, lurking in the tunnels which feasts on humans. The other plot line I can't really get into too much detail about without spoiling things, so I won't. But this story goes to some incredibly weird and wonderful locations. It does things with the scope which were far beyond my expectations. I thought this was just going to be a bit of a prison escape story, which half of it is. And there are so many ideas in here that honestly not all of them work. There are passages of really bad writing. There are passages of really good writing. And I think in the end, the good just about outmuscles the bad. There are some really exciting sequences, particularly in the prison plotline, which go into the realm of science fiction horror, which I always find is quite difficult to come across in this genre, and it's often not done very well when people do try to handle it. I do think that is pretty good in here. And then the ending does some quite spectacular and unexpected things, which again I'm not going to spoil. So I would recommend reading Chthon, but be warned that there are some very extreme sequences of violence. Some of it is sexual violence as well. So this one's definitely not going to be for everyone. But if you want to read something that is really strange and really different, I think Chthon could be a winner for you. And the second book I read recently is In the Footsteps of the Abominable Snowman by Josef Nesvadba. Now, I picked this one up in a local bookshop because I was pretty compelled by the cover art there. And also, I'd never heard of Josef Nesvadba either. So it turns out that he was a Czech science fiction author who primarily wrote short fiction. And that's what this is. It's a collection of science fiction short stories. And you'll see there that there is an introduction from the legendary English author Brian Aldiss, who wrote Hot House and Non-Stop, also known as Starship, and a number of other highly respected works. Brian Aldiss's introduction is actually quite funny, and it introduces us to Josef Nesvadba as an author, gives us a little bit of background on him, and also speaks about some of the interactions that Aldiss had personally with Nesvadba. The stories in here range from Nazi time machines to a man raised by apes to the titular Abominable Snowman story, and they are all okay. None of them really left me wanting more. None of them really packed much of a punch for me personally. Josef Nesvadba seems to consistently reference either the Nazis or the World Wars directly or indirectly throughout these stories. And also, interestingly, he touches a lot on colonial Africa, with some of the stories either taking place partially in colonial Africa or at least mentioning it. It was translated from Czech, and I think the translation is okay. I think the stories are okay, and I think the writing is okay. So it is another one for me where a short story collection hasn't really blown me away. I'm still looking for one that really does that. I think the closest I've come to really enjoying a short story collection was William Gibson's Burning Chrome, which is a collection of his cyberpunk short stories. There is one in here which I did find the most interesting, was about a surgeon who is forced to perform a face transplant surgery on a criminal, and the criminal begins to take on and adopt the traits of the man whose face he has transplanted onto his own. That's everything for today. The next video I'll be talking about military science fiction. I've got a couple of books to finish before I get to that video. But I just wanted to say, if you've made it to the end of this one, that I am blown away by the support. I've hit over 100 subscribers, so thank you very much for subscribing. I've got a lot to do with this channel. I want to upgrade my setup and get better at discussing these books as well. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one.